Hello and welcome to September's All the Everything. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And this is going to be a gold-packed episode. As I was just saying, I was just in the Prom Happiness Facebook group doing the pre-show party. And as I was just saying there, I'm going to reveal some of our secret sauce in this episode. So I really would invite you to engage fully. It's going to be as much kind of, I'm going to give information. I'm going to give some of the work that we do with our clients in crucibles like Waking Wild Medicine and Waking Wild Sovereign. But it's not just going to be informational. It's very much going to be inquiries and invitations that you can engage with and then take away from the show and deepen into. And so I'm going to put as much into this as possible without wanting to make it overwhelming. You know, as I was just saying, Waking Wild Medicine, for example, is a 9-month crucible with a month break. So actually sort of 10 months in duration. And so I can't clearly do justice to everything we would do in a crucible like that. But again, I'm going to very much like pull back the kimono and give you at least those kind of a good chunk of the breadcrumbs, like half a loaf of breadcrumbs, so you can begin walking in this direction if you feel so inspired of becoming your medicine. So I want to start by talking about why this episode is focused specifically on coaches and also widen it out slightly, not too much, but slightly. So I'll say at the outset, actually, if you don't identify at all as a coach or anything in that realm, there still likely will be much of this episode once I get past the first part that absolutely will be interesting and inspiring and useful to you. So you don't actually have to be a coach to find this useful, but you will find it especially useful and relevant if you are. And again, I'm going to just broaden that out slightly. We decided to make this episode very much focused on a particular type of person who we have served a lot and have done really powerful work with. And many of them do identify as coaches. And so that's why we thought it'd be really helpful to create an episode that's directly talking to those people, because we know how powerfully we can help those people. So that's why we decided to name this episode and include that word coach. And sometimes the word might not be coach, but it might be something in that realm. So talking personally, I have called myself a coach at some point over the years. But I think in the early days, I was actually something like, I mean, if anything, I've probably avoided naming what I do as much as I possibly can, because nothing ever quite sat. But I guess I could have been described as a 3 principles practitioner, which many of you will know was a kind of form of spirituality that I initially trained in. And I know many of our listeners are also in that world of the 3 principles. Or similar kinds of what you could say like non-dual transcendent spiritual paths. So it could be you are a practitioner or a facilitator along those lines. I would also say much of what I'm talking about would also apply to forms of therapists. And more, that many therapists are kind of also have, there may well be sort of separate practices, but often have like a therapy practice and then more of what you could call a coaching practice. So I'm absolutely talking to you if you are somewhere in that realm. And there's other words like, say, counselor. So there's a grouping that I'm going to keep naming coach for short, but really I'm talking about anything that fits in that wider category that is akin to a coach. And again, the reason for doing so is that we've seen that a good, maybe 80% of our clients and students are coaches of some form. So that's the reason we've done this. We've really seen that just naturally, without us actually intending to speak to attract those people, that's just naturally what's happened. And so it seems to make sense to now more intentionally speak to you. Where shall I go next? Okay. Something I really want to acknowledge is most of us, I'm not going to say all of us, but I'm going to say almost all of us who have found ourselves somehow becoming coaches, often didn't start out that way, but one way or another felt a calling towards it. And that can come in so many different forms. I've shared some of my own story on the show in the past, where it was very, very sudden and unexpected, a kind of being blasted open to spirit when my father died, being sort of thrown headlong into what you could describe as a non-dual experience, and then wanting to understand, like, how do I language this? How do I share this with others? Because it's been so beneficial to me. And then kind of over the years with then, you know, doing sort of formal training and things, having different kinds of experiences, I found myself in a position where, in fact, this happened very fast. It doesn't happen as fast as for everyone, but I went from being a leader in the corporate world, actually loved my job, was very good at my job. I was very much kind of in the online digital world, which suits a lot of my gifts. So I was fairly fulfilled doing it, albeit always having this sense of, this isn't really what I'm here for. I'm here for something more, but I have no idea what it is. So as I opened to some sense of what I was here for, I look back and I think, my goodness, actually, I knew very little compared to what's been revealed since. And yet that to me felt like it was the closest vehicle, let's say, for me to be of service, to do what felt like I was here to do. And I know so many of the coaches that come to us, they'll have different stories, but a similar kind of sense of calling. Like, one way or another, I am here to guide others, to serve others, to teach others, to heal others, to love others, to hold others. They might have a different way of wording it, but ultimately I would say for so many of us the instinct's the same. It's this sense of, I'm here to provide this this deeper way of meeting people and seeing people than is typically available out there in the world. And so compared to what we might have been doing previously, I mean, some people kind of, you know, came straight out of education, straight into being coaches, but I'm going to go on the idea that that is, from what I've seen, as such a minority. I'm going to really speak to the majority of us that found ourselves in that role, having often done something quite different beforehand. And again, compared to what we used to do, it can feel so good in comparison. I remember for the first couple of years of being something, you know, roughly that we could call a coach, I felt like the luckiest woman on earth. Like, wow, how have I managed to find myself doing something that's so fulfilling, is you know, having this beautiful impact, is actually of service to others. I'm free to choose how to create my business. I really did feel like I'd hit the jackpot of life, quite honestly. And I know, again, speaking to many other coaches, there's almost a kind of honeymoon period with it, where very much there can be this like, oh my goodness, and often this sense of almost like evangelism that comes with it, particularly if the form of coaching we're trained in has a kind of more, so let's say, like spiritual or soulful sense to it where we almost like I need to get this message out there. The world needs to know this thing that I've discovered and I've been so blessed with, and I'm helping so many other people with it. Like the whole world needs to know. So those honeymoon years, you know, and again, this is going to last a different amount of time for different people. Those years can feel absolutely amazing. And again, so much better than where we'd come from, even if, like as in my instance, I was actually really happy doing the job I used to do. And then little by little, and sometimes this is faster, you know, some people kind of come out the gate feeling some of what I've described in being a coach, but are faced with the obstacles much sooner. So for my trajectory was much more was slightly different in that the kind of road bumps were a little bit subtler and a little bit more spaced out. But often they can be come around the same time. It's like, I know this is my calling. I know this is what feels like I ought to be doing. And yet I can't really seem to get traction. I can't really seem to make a difference. I can't seem to enroll clients. I can't really seem to serve them deeply. I can't seem to charge something that actually would allow me to create a good living. So sometimes those challenges, those obstacles can be there right from the beginning. Again, sometimes that can take a little while for it to become the focus. And this is a big part of the reason why. There's two things I'm going to share with you why we find ourselves in this situation. So the first thing is the limitations of the coach. And I'm going to say archetype, but when I say archetype, it's like archetype in quote marks, really. It's closer to a stereotype. It's quite a shallow, less potent, quite diluted and formulaic in a way version of much more ancient, potent archetypes. And so again, within what's available, what's visible to us in our mainstream culture, becoming a coach seems like, you know, to many of us quite edgy, quite liberating. Again, will often allow us to be much more ourselves and much more impactful than perhaps anything we were doing before. And yet it's a very limited version of much more ancient archetypes. I'm going to talk much more about those archetypes in a moment, but just to name a couple now, these are archetypes that have been around for most of human history, like the shaman, like the priest or the priestess. These are roles that people had in the village that our cultures have been created around. They are a vital, absolutely vital part of a properly functioning, thriving human village. So because we've lost so much of our heritage, so much of the village is no longer there, these roles have to a large extent disappeared with it. And this kind of fairly modern day reclamation of it in the form of a coach is definitely a step in the right direction. And hence why it does feel like it's so powerful compared to not having it. And yet recognizing it's limited, it's very shallow, it's very small compared to these much more ancient, powerful archetypes that again are our human birthright. We need them in our villages. So that's the first issue. And so that means that if you've come here to be a shaman, and whether or not you call yourself shaman, I mean more the archetypal qualities of a shaman, if that's what you're here to do, and then you're trying to contort yourself into the limitations of a coach, of course, your impact, your fulfillment is going to be limited. So I'm going to talk a bit more about archetypes in the moment, but first I really want you to hear there's like absolutely nothing wrong with the fact that you found yourself as a coach. That is right and it is beautiful. It is absolutely aligned that you found yourself here. and there is more for you. There is more for you to become. The second obstacle is that for almost all of us, as we set foot on this path of becoming a coach, we will have either via formal trainings or from being coached ourselves or through what we're seeing on social media, started to create this idea of a formula, a way of doing coaching. And again, sometimes it might be an actual methodology we've been trained in, but it's often going to be a blend. Like I was trained in a sort of formal methodology, and then I've then taken other shorter courses, and I've read books, and I've had all these influences that created this idea that I had of, this is how to be a good coach. This is how to be a prosperous coach. This is how to be a great coach, an impactful coach. And so all of these ideas that we have create, again, more contortion, more mimicking, more, I need to do this a certain way in order to have impact. And I'm sure you're already recognizing, there's not to say methods and principles and ideas. I've got hair sticking to my lips. It's not to say these ideas and these principles have no value. They can be absolutely valuable, but if they become the focus, if they become the priority, then we are not able to honor our unique soul. We're not able to honor all of the things that are unique to us, that are of vital importance to the world around us. And so no wonder we are going to then feel as though we are not able to make that full impact we came to make. So often when coaches come to us, sometimes they are actually doing well, in coaching terms, they can be very successful financially, but often working really hard, and often in very unaligned ways. I'm going to talk a bit more about kind of like ways that we can work that are either in or out of alignment for us. But, sometimes having real peaks and troughs of energy. So there might be go, 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 and then feeling very burned out and needing to kind of like completely collapse to recover. Sometimes it might not be as peaky and troughy as that. Sometimes it might just be this general feeling of, I need to continue like hustling and working hard and thinking constantly about my business in order to maintain this financial success that I've got. And, that doesn't feel good. Great, tick the box of having a successful coaching practice, but it doesn't feel good. Some are making some kind of impact, and again, maybe not as much of an impact as they feel they're capable of. And it's that they're really coming to us with. It's like, it's not that it's a complete non-starter. I have made some impact, and yet I feel like I'm kind of reaching this cap where I can't seem to make for example, again, talking about money, I can't seem to make the financial abundance that I really feel that is aligned for me and I'm capable of. Or I can't seem to make the impact with my clients that I really know deep down I'm capable of, but can't seem to access. And then others, it might well be that they're doing okay, like it's all okay in terms of, and maybe better than okay, maybe fine in terms of their coaching practice, but they're feeling like they're not really lit up. And it could be specifically they're not being lit up in their work, or it could be like, yeah, the work's okay, but other parts of their life aren't. There's almost like this, I'm able to kind of feel like I'm doing something good in my work, but it's just like the rest of my life doesn't really feel like it's for me. But often it's a mix. It's very rare. It might be they're just more aware of it in other parts of their life and less aware of it in their business. So that's typically what we see in terms of, these are kind of very like pen portrait examples, but they are often what we see when people come to us as coaches who really want to do this work of becoming their medicine. I'll talk a bit more about what I mean when I say medicine, but I will give a disclaimer first. Whilst it's sounding like, why wouldn't you, like, why wouldn't you go from this coach who is one way or another not having all of the abundance and impact and fulfillment you came here for, so why wouldn't you just do the work to become your medicine? The reason you might not is, honestly, it is often the deepest, most challenging work we can possibly do. I posted something a couple of days ago that said something like, creating a soul business is the deepest spiritual work we can do, and it will like require us to meet those parts of us that we've kind of shoved away into shadow, those parts of us we're ashamed of, that are really ugly, really scary, and it will require us that we love them. So it is really, really challenging at points. It's also, wonderful and fun and, juicy and beautiful and all those things, but it can be so challenging. And so it means that we have to journey through that in order to arrive at this business, this work, but again, really our overall life that is uniquely aligned for us. So I'm going to take a quick mouthful of my lemon and ginger tea. And then I'm going to speak a little bit more about archetypes and why they're relevant here. I'm just getting over a bit of a cough, so hence the lemon ginger is quite medicinal. Okay. So I'm going to say at the outset, before I even get into these archetypes, that the thing that I would say is true for the vast majority, again, I'm not going to say all. Oh, I'm going to have a bit of a cough. I'm going to go on mute a sec. Sorry about that, rather than roar down the mic. So I would say almost all coaches are what we would call magical, and either don't know it or suspect it, but aren't quite ready to fully own it. And this is a really important thing. And the reason it's really important is those ancient, I just realized why I'm coughing. It's a incense I've got burning. I'm going to go and put the incense out so I'm not constantly coughing. Give me a moment, please. Okay, sorry about that. So the reason is of vital importance to recognize the magical nature of yourself as a coach is that the archetypes themselves are magical archetypes, meaning, going back to what I said about these people's role in the village, it was a magical role. It was a spiritual role. It required being open to work with unseen realms, unseen forces, unseen spirits, powers that are beyond the mundane world. And so without having some, I mean, it doesn't have to be a full-on like, yay, I'm ready to kind of out myself as magical. I know myself, and I've spoken about this. I did a whole show a couple of years ago, I think, about my own journey with magic. So I'm not at all saying that this needs to be a complete acceptance right from this moment, but at least opening to that possibility, because without that, so little of what I'm going to say next is going to be of any use at all. So I'm not saying you have to believe me. What I would invite you to do is just be open to the possibility. Just be open and curious to the possibility that you are magical, that you have powers beyond the mundane. And again, when I'm saying magical, we could say, well, isn't everything and everything magical? Yes, through one definition, we could say that. I'm talking about this in a very practical sense. I'm talking about the fact that some people are here with specific gifts that allow them to work in ways that we could call magical, that other people aren't. It doesn't make them better. It doesn't make them special even. It just means that is their role. And until they can recognize their magical nature, they won't be able to fulfill it. So that's part of it. I'm sure I've spoken about ways you'll know yourself as a magical one. And I've certainly spoken about it on the series we did on magical archetypes, and also on the webinar that Jonathan and I did next year. So we'll make sure they're all linked in the comments. Some key features, I would say, these are just like literally off the top of my head. I'll just name a few things, but this is, again, a much deeper inquiry that you'll need to be open to. You could be someone like me who's incredibly sensitive. I mean, I'm sensitive to energies. I'm sensitive to the environment. I'm sensitive to light and temperature and the texture of things. I'm very sensitive to the smell of things. Often that is a key trait of magical people, actually. Often it is smell, but it could be any one of those senses, like extremely sensitive. I'm also very open psychically. And that wasn't as obvious to me as it is now. When I was younger, that would come in forms that were absolutely unwelcome, were scary as hell. I've spoken before, you may have heard me talk about how I used to have hallucinations and dissociative episodes. So often people who are magical will have some kinds of experiences where they felt like they weren't in a kind of like control, let's say, of their experience. They had things coming into their awareness, either visual or words or feelings, that didn't feel like they were theirs. And so again, everyone's going to have their own unique version of that because we're unique, but these are typical experiences that magical people have. They also may well have had let's say, more psychic experiences that are more easier to recognize as psychic, for example, extreme intuition, knowing when something's going to happen, knowing, for example, that someone's going to die, knowing that someone's thinking about you, and you reach out to them and they say, oh, I was just thinking about you, or I just, I had this happen, I really needed help. So there might be very specific things that were easier to sort of think, yeah, I do seem to have a little bit more of the kind of spidey senses than average. There are often, and I spoke about this at length with my shamanic teacher, Jez Hughes, a month or so ago, about shamanic sickness. So like me, many of our clients will have had forms of shamanic sickness, periods where they had chronic pain or chronic fatigue, or in my teacher's case, he had seizures. So often it will come in these forms that just aren't understood by our mainstream medical model. So again, I'm not going to make the whole show about this, but it is so important, because without this, again, nothing really else is going to be helpful. So there does need to be, at least again, like an openness to the possibility of being magical. From there, you are then able to start to recognize those archetypes that can inform and activate and empower and guide you being your medicine. And I'm going to define medicine again. I don't think I've defined it yet. I'm going to define medicine in a moment, but for the moment, I really want to focus on these magical archetypes. So recognizing which of those archetypes is calling you, which of those archetypes should come here with a blueprint, maybe not activated, but a blueprint in your body, ready to be invoked. And again, I did a whole video series on many of the different magical archetypes that I would really invite you to go have a look at, because I don't have time to go in depth into them here. But the typical ones that we see show over and over again with the people that come to work with us, we have priestesses, as shamans. And again, don't take these too literally, as in like that's literally the job they do. Sometimes they are, but is often more about the archetypal qualities. The witch, the medicine man or woman, and the sage. These are the common ones that we see, and they can also work together. So for example, for me, I have the shaman and the priestess are my two key magical archetypes that are so kind of overlapped and infused with each other. It's actually sometimes quite hard to tell which it is, and yet they do have some distinct qualities that are both very natural for me. I've taken a lot of wrestling and resistance to get to the point where they're natural for me, but they are actually natural. Okay, so now is a good point actually to say what I mean by medicine. Our medicine is an infusion, an amalgamation, and an alchemization of all different parts of us coming together in a unique way, a way that is unique to us. There are no two souls that are the same. And so all of these different attributes of us, and very specifically, the way that we were meant to serve others, is our medicine. And one of the most important parts of our medicine is the part that I would say, gosh, probably in the high 90s, actually, most people, and including, I'd say most coaches, absolutely either aren't aware of, or if they are a bit aware of, will quite understandably avoid going there. And that's our deepest wound. That deepest wound that we've experienced, and often it will be some kind of trauma or conditioning in childhood, our sacred gift that forms such an important part of our medicine will be found there. So often for most people, again, this includes most coaches, we would have created lives that one way or another allows our wounds to avoid being triggered. They will be triggered. We got to be triggered because that's what happens in life. And yet we would have created lives that are almost in honor of avoiding our wounds being triggered. It would be subconsciously created, and sometimes to an extent consciously created, in a way that allows us to feel safe, that we're not having to be plunged back into the hell that was that original wound. Ironically, sometimes what we actually creates that over and over again, but all of this is happening at very much a subconscious level. Very few people will actually consciously go into their wounds in the way that is necessary to reclaim that part of us that's held there. Reclaim the gift, the part of our soul that can only be reclaimed, rediscovered, alchemized from that wound if we go there to the depths of it. So that's, again, the work that we will do with our clients that really does require so much love, so much tending, because of course it's painful. And it is essential if we want to be the fullness of our unique medicine. If we were to not do that, there's definitely aspects of other aspects of our medicine that we definitely could allow to kind of be more online, be more part of the way that we serve. And yet, without going into that deepest wound, that sacred wound, we cannot become our sacred gift. And so that's a really important part to know. And it really does become, the beauty of this is when we go there, what we find there, first and foremost, is medicine for ourselves. We always give our own medicine to ourselves first. So when we go to our wound, we discover what's there. And often we kind of know it, but we spent a lifetime not really wanting to see it fully. When we go there intentionally with love, and it takes real courage, we can reclaim that part of us and first and foremost allow it to be medicine for ourselves before we even think about giving it to others. So I'm going to give an example, which you would have heard me talk about before in different contexts. For me, my wound was around experiences I'd had that resulted in an avoidance and rejection of the feminine. embodying the feminine, and also the feminine out there in the form of women, and also like feminine energetics, let's say, felt really unsafe and unwelcome to me. And so I built a life that was very much in honor of logic and control. Whatever allowed me to know things are this way, I'm safe. No one's going to have control over me. I'm going to decide how things are. And then as I've done the work to go into that wound and reclaim that part of myself, which again is the hardest work I've honestly ever done, I'm now devoted to embodying the feminine. And the irony is so rich. This is the funniest part of us becoming our medicine. It almost always requires being the very thing that we absolutely were repulsed by, were scared stiff of, that we thought was the most unattractive, unsafe thing we could do. And so my example is a perfect example of that. Like, I would not have believed it. I was a tomboy from a very, very young age. And if someone had told me this was the work I would do, I don't even know how I would have reacted. I would have thought it was absolutely ludicrous. So again, for me, a key part of my medicine, the most potent part of my medicine, is that devotion to embody the feminine, and very especially the love and the magic and the beauty and the truth of the feminine. Those are the aspects that are now deeply important to me and deeply infuse all that I am, and particularly my medicine. And even more deeply than that, all of that is in devotion to union. That's really what my medicine's about. It's a union of many things. It's a union of the human and the soul. It's the union of the masculine and feminine. None of that is possible without me being willing to go first, without me being willing to embody the feminine and live in union with the masculine. So this is an example. Everyone's going to have their own. I don't think I've come across a woman who has that exact medicine, although often they will have wounding around the feminine and often wounding around the masculine. It doesn't mean that necessarily is their sacred wound and therefore their sacred gift. So this again is very unique to us and our experiences, and ultimately who we chose to come here to be. Okay, I'm going to take a mouthful of water. How am I doing for time? Again, I did say I was going to go pretty deep into much of how we discover our medicine, but I'm also trying to recognize too much and it'll be overwhelming. So I'm sort of trying to track how much I'm bombarding you with, and so I can titrate it a little bit. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is what we call gold. And this could also be described as your kind of core essence. It's certainly an aspect of your soul. And I've done a good couple of episodes, a good few years ago now, actually, with the brilliant Adam Quiney, who was taught a particular method of distilling someone's essence. And so the way that we do it is very much inspired. We've taken it and worked with it so it is kind of more infused with the work of Waking the Wild. But I just really want to credit and acknowledge Adam Quiney for him teaching me this way of working before I go into it. And again, I'd really recommend go listen to the shows I did with him. Also go check out Adam Quiney's work on this, because it is absolutely so much more powerful than it first meets the eye. As I describe it, it might sound a little bit like, isn't that just personality typing? No, it goes so deep. So some examples of the things we can discover about ourselves when we look at it through this lens are qualities like brilliance or peace or love. And so we distill these, and there's a whole method we go through to do this, but we still distill it into 5 words. And each of them will have a kind of light aspect, a gold aspect, and they'll also have a shadow aspect. In fact, two ends of the pole in terms of the shadow. And I spoke a few months ago about what I mean when I say the shadow pole. I won't go into that now. But those qualities will have a big impact on the medicine we're here to be, and very particularly how we serve it. So many of our clients are brilliant. They are intelligent, yes, but more than that, they are the way they can use their minds, the fastness of their mind, the processing speed of their mind, the way they can articulate what's happening up here, out here. This will form a very important part of how and how they deliver their medicine, but also the particular type it is. Another example of this is some people are truth. And so part of their medicine will be very much being a truth teller. So I'm mentioning this. If you go listen to the first show I did with Adam Quiney, we actually take you through like how you can go do this yourself, which again, I can't go into in depth in this show, but certainly if you're hearing something in here that you're intrigued by, that is something you can go and explore on your own. The next thing is innate gifts, which could call like aptitudes or skills. So this is different. Like what I've just described is more like who you are without doing anything. It's just like that effortless beingness of you. And again, sometimes it's not quite so effortless because there's shadow there, but putting shadow aside, that is just who you be. You don't need to do anything to be those qualities. Whereas the innate gifts, the skills are more, they are innate to you, but they're more of a kind of doing. They're things that you do in the world that are ways that support you serving your medicine. So an example of that that's true for me is I'm very much a systems thinker. I think in patterns. I see systems and patterns all the time. And so often when I'm working, what I'm doing is seeing things like if I'm working with a particular person, I'm seeing what's showing up through the lens of all sorts of systems, whether that be archetypes, whether that be types of shadow. I'll be looking at all the time through all these different lenses, just naturally, because that's how I think. Another example of this could be someone who is innately very good at writing or speaking. And so these are examples of those skills that aren't your medicine exactly, but they certainly form part of it. And they are ways that can support you in more powerfully serving your medicine. Okay, how much more shall I say about this again? Because there's so many different aspects to our medicine. So I'm really wanting to focus on some of the core ones whilst not overloading you. So lastly, I'm just going to touch on this. What we can also find is really illuminating is our human design and gene keys types. And these can be very informative. And I would certainly not say start with them. I find it much more useful to look at other things first and then start to look at it through the lens of our human design and gene keys. And then it can often give us, for example, archetypes and words that provide an opening into seeing something more. And very specifically, particularly with human design, it can be really helpful in understanding how we run energy. And so certain types, and you may have listened to us talk about this on the show before, certain types, for example, projectors, and I'm surrounded by projectors. Jonathan is a projector, Sarah is a projector. And the way they run energy is quite different to other types. And so they would typically won't be able to kind of go like some of the other types. So they'll need more rest, they'll need more spaciousness. Conversely, a human design type like me, a manifesting generator, I have bags and bags of energy. And I also am constantly like skipping from one thing to the other. I'm like a butterfly, just moving from one thing and being really lit up by it and then moving over here. So it'd be very helpful to recognize what allows you to feel vibrant, filled of energy, and on the times where that isn't present. So that can be really helpful. The both human design and gene keys in different ways can really illuminate your purpose. And again, this isn't the idea like this, throw out everything else you know about yourself. It's very much more a lens through which to look for, to kind of further illuminate, further inform things you're already starting to see. It can help to kind of pull certain threads through. then it can also, and again, they work in different ways. They're very complementary because they're built on the same system, but through different ways, they can illuminate specific gifts. So again, you might already have a sense of, I'll give you an example of this. In human designs, if you're familiar with the charts, there's different parts of your body that are different shapes. If they're connected by a line that's completely colored, it's known as a channel, which can be seen as a gift. And I've got several gifts that are around power and leadership. And it's not that that hasn't been reflected to me in other ways, but it has been really helpful to be able to sort of see it there and go, oh, okay. I have a channel that's known as the channel of the alpha, which again is like very much a leadership channel. And it was quite permission giving, really, to come away from a human design reading and go, oh, okay, I'm meant to do that. It was very much like, okay, I'm going to just like fully allow myself to kind of relax into that being part of my role and let go of some of the thinking I had, like, is it shadow? Is it a need for control? Is it ego that I kind of want to be the leader? And very much just let myself realize, like, no, it is just a gift that allows me to more deeply serve my medicine. Okay, so with having a sense of all of those different things, and I say and more, but this will give you, again, a good sort of half a loaf of breadcrumbs to get started, you'll start to have a sense of that unique medicine you came here to be. Of course, it takes time to start to put that into the world. This will inform, the more we have this complete understanding, this gnosis of self, we can then start to begin to serve it. And as we do so, we start to discover things about that. Typically, our sort of soul clients, our dream clients, are often an earlier version of us, not always, or there might be aspects of them that are an earlier version of us. And so it's really helpful to see, oh, okay, there they are where I was then. And it's going to be really helpful to get them to see the possibility and support them to get to that next part on their journey, which is exactly what I'm doing here. You can tell, you know, I'm sharing with you how I went from being a coach to being my medicine. Doesn't mean that you listening are here to also help people to do that. Your medicine will be different, but there'll be something within your own journey, and often really informed by what I was talking about earlier, what's held in your sacred wound, that will inform who you serve and that journey you take them on. The how you serve, again, very much is influenced by all different aspects of your medicine, but also just making a start. Often we need to be courageous and start to allow ourselves to serve it, to allow our medicine to come through us, to start to learn, it's more powerful when I'm, for example, working with someone one-to-one in a in-person setting. And it's more helpful if I don't actually have very much in the way of like process or methodology, but I'm actually just wide open to whatever needs to channel through me. These are just examples. This will also, and this is a really important thing, again, in a world which is telling us there is a way to market, a way to sell our services, recognizing that this too, us putting ourselves out in the world, aka marketing, is really as much our medicine as the bit where we're kind of in front of a client and serving them. And so that can make the biggest difference to people as they start to become the unique medicine. Suddenly, marketing becomes a dream. So for some people, it's really aligned for them to use social media or to create, things like this, it's very meta, to have a podcast. That's true for me. It's deeply aligned. Like, this is me being my medicine, and it feels effortless. It's delightful. It is a form of marketing. But quite frankly, when I first started the podcast at Jonathan's suggestion, it wasn't like, oh, it will be a form of marketing. And it wasn't really a form of marketing for a good few years. If that had been the intention, it probably wouldn't have actually shown like a worthwhile ROI for a good amount of time, probably would have given up by then. It is really a way of me serving my medicine. And so for me, I love to write, I love to express myself, I love to have conversations, I'm very curious. And so it is very natural for me to do that. And it happens to act as a form of marketing. It isn't done as a form of marketing, it just is, because it's an expression of my medicine. For others, and this includes, again, people that we've worked with, that isn't aligned at all. In fact, Jonathan's a great example. It's not aligned for him at all. He really doesn't use social media, even personally. It doesn't matter, because he doesn't need to. We're working in alignment with who we are, with who our medicine is, with our energetic type. And so for him, that's not aligned. That's perfect. For trying to force yourself, if you kind of think, oh, I need to be all over social media in order to have a successful business, you are going to be pushing against what's right for you. You're going to be constricting how your medicine's meant to be expressed in the world. It could be one of our clients early this week we're talking about. For her, she's actually had a past of being really successful on social media. And maybe at that time it was aligned. I think there was a kind of almost discovery process that included expression that at the time was aligned. Now it's not, and it may never be. She is actually a projector like Jonathan. And for her, it's very much recognizing where spirit's calling her to. That nudge, reach out to this person. A dream about this person is going to be aligned for me to work with them. And so recognize this is going to be very unique again to each of us, depending on our medicine. Some of our clients do almost nothing in the form of what we could typically describe as marketing, and yet they I don't know, maybe so networked, they may have such a network and just are constantly being referred and have lots of word of mouth, which actually honestly is a lot of also how people come to us. It might be that they do nothing in the form of anything that remotely could be described as marketing. So really want to emphasize, when we're talking about being your medicine, it really can inform all parts of your business. Which then finally I'm going to say, it can also inform all parts of your life. This is the beauty of it. The more we become who we really are, that soul, that unique soul that we came to live in this lifetime, as we get to know that part of us that has been hidden in that deepest wound, we can then create our entire life from it. We can create our relationships from that place. We can create the environment we live in from that place. All of it comes from that deepest essence that we are. So I would love to know what's coming up for you as you listen to this. I would love for you to share in the group, email us, tell us. This is something that again is so much more real and engaging and activating when we're allowing ourselves to fully go into these explorations. This is not something we can just do with our heads. We need to be able to do it courageously with all our heart, but often with the support of others because of what it requires. So we're here for you. Do share if you would like to, any of what came up for you as you listen to this. Okay, I think I'm now out of time. So if you would like more of this kind of goodness that I've been speaking to, and again, we will make sure all of the different things I've spoken to are linked in the show notes and the comments. But if you would like to explore more, firstly, we don't have any crucibles open right now, but the next one I believe will be opening will be in early 2023, and that will be Waking Wild Sovereign. That one is very specifically focused on sovereignty, which includes being your medicine. So it's not that we don't focus on medicine within it, it's just got a broader focus that includes rising into sovereignty. So that's going to be the next one. It always sells out. So if that feels like it could be for you, go to primalhappiness.co/WTWS. If you are very specifically feeling this call to be your unique medicine, the next round of Waking Wild Medicine will be starting possibly around March 2023. And that's at primalhappiness.co/medicine. And what else? What else? So if you're, I always get this, I get confused where you might be watching this and then what to mention. So if you're watching this on YouTube or in the Facebook group and you're not yet a listener of our podcast, then do go subscribe, because we have a weekly show and oh my goodness, like we cover the most weird and wonderful eclectic mix every week. And that's at primalhappiness.co/podcast. And if you're not already a member of our Facebook group and therefore you missed out on the pre-show party, that's at facebook.com/group/primalhappiness. So do come join us. And while I'm here, I'm going to remember also to ask you if you'd like to subscribe to our Moonly newsletter. And that goes out, as the name suggests, every moon. So the full moon and the new moon every month. And that is jam-packed with all sorts of creations and rituals and invitations. So that's primalhappiness.co/Moonly. So that is me done. And again, I would absolutely love to know what came up for you. This very much is the kind of early stages of the deepest, most soulful journey of your life, if you choose it that way. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I love you. Mwah. Goodbye.